Well, good evening, everyone. I was in Zoom meetings all day long, and I had a board meeting with a church, one of the churches in the diocese, at 6 p.m. Got off and sat down for dinner, and was about to turn on the news, and my wife goes, "Hey, Edwin, it's 2 minutes to 8." I went, so I completely forgot about you. It's not that I don't love you. It's that I completely forgot about you. So I did come on and I did have a little bit of a pour to just celebrate the fact I do actually love you. And so let's begin this evening. We have a tremendous blessing. We have our own in the Diocese of St. Anthony, Father Preston Sharpe, who is with us tonight, and he's going to be sharing with us. I hope you have had a wonderful day. And so we'll just jump right into it and pretend I was planning on this all day long, right? So, Father Preston, welcome to you, friend. I hope you have something to tell us. How are you doing? You're over in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. Also son of Brent and Janice Sharpe, Father Brent and Reverend Janice Sharpe. So they just have the priesthood in the family, just like Levite, or something, right? Or Aaron.
Sure.
The family. Welcome, my friend. Tell us how it's going over there and maybe share with us some thoughts of encouragement tonight on the 8th. Welcome, welcome.
Sure, thanks. So I have the privilege of knowing some of you. I worked at Sanctuary for a long time, and so I got to know a bunch of you in different ways, and we're kind of in and out, all of our families in Tulsa, but we moved here in 2013 to plant a church. Wow. So we pastor Sacrament Church, and it's been great. We're adjusting just like everybody is, but it's been a good season. I had some thoughts today I want to talk about that I've been reflecting on and really thinking about in-between spaces, or spaces of tension where we feel multiple things at once. And Bishop Ed, are you ready for me to jump into that?
I am so ready for you because I am so in the in-between spaces. I am like ready for in-between ministry.
Great. Well, I just think about us in the Easter season right now. And as we read the Easter texts that we've read the past few weeks in church, so many of them have to do with like, okay, resurrections happened, but we still feel strange or still feel weird. So like this last Sunday, Luke 24, there's 2 disciples who are leaving Jerusalem and they're grieving that they lost Jesus. But then they are also hearing these rumors of resurrection and they don't know really what to do with that. And then we see Mary Magdalene at the tomb. She's grieving Jesus, but he's also risen from the dead. So resurrections happened, but she's feeling grief, and feeling fear too. So I thought about that, and I thought about some of the in-between spaces that we're all maybe feeling right now and that tension that we're experiencing. And so I thought about a kind of the global tension that we have, the personal tension that we have, and then the existential tension that we're feeling right now. And there's all the different things. So the global tension, I think everybody's feeling it right now as we have this health pandemic going on, this health crisis, and then we have this economic crisis, right? And it just seems like everybody that you talk to, it's just really quick to say which one they're most concerned about, right? Which one they feel the most fear point about, the economic or the health. And so it's become something, unfortunately, that's been really politicized. And, I think about just I had hoped at the beginning of this that a pandemic wouldn't be something that was politicized. And I've gotten really naive, I think, about that. And now it's just become one of the many ways that we just say what team we're on, if we're kind of on this side or on this side. And we've kind of turned everything in our culture into that, right? Like, am I more concerned about this thing or about this thing? And so as I thought about this global crisis that we're in, I just thought about how important it is for the church now to have empathy, to listen to people's fears and to wrestle with the fears kind of on both sides. Part of that for us is, I think, avoiding the caricatures. So, sometimes we meet somebody and, if it seems seems like somebody's really in a hurry to just get the economy going really fast. And we may make a judgment that they're just too concerned about money. We need to be careful that they're not necessarily what they're feeling right now. Or on the other side, if somebody's more hesitant, that we might think, oh, they're just operating in fear. They're just fearful, and they, just want to stay in their house and maybe don't worry about the economy or whatever. But I think about how Jesus encountered these people in the midst of their fears. And, you have Mary Magdalene grieving, and Jesus says to her at the tomb, tell me about what you're feeling and what you're grieving. When the disciples are leaving Jerusalem, Jesus says, tell me everything that's happened. And I just think about the opportunity that we have with one another to empathize and experience, each other's fears, and to really listen to one another and actually draw closer together through empathy. So we have this kind of global tension, but then I also think there's a personal tension, because some of us have experienced a really big interruption in our schedules, right? Like everything has changed and everything's been reoriented. And so there's almost this balance or this tension right now between productivity, rest, and quality time or connection with other people. And so we're all kind of adjusting our schedules like this new reality or this new normal. And we try to kind of balance those things. And when it comes to productivity, I know that not everybody has seen a halt in productivity in this time. Some people are working more, especially the essential workers right now are probably working more. A lot of people are working more from home. But I do think that we've all lost some perceived control over how productive we can be, right? So all of us, there's this myth in our culture that if we just work harder and produce more, that's how we're going to make life better. And I think in the result of that, many of us have become like addicted to productivity, and we just don't know how to stop that. And so in some ways, for those of us that this has been a halt in our productivity, it's caused us to slow down, and we have kind of a forced Sabbath. But it also, for those of us that are addicted to productivity and we just can't stop, in this time we channel it to other things. So we go, I'm still obsessed with productivity, but now I got to redo my kitchen, or I got to come up with the perfect homeschooling plan, or I have to constantly produce online content right now. And even though all those things can be really good things, we have to be careful that productivity doesn't become an idol for us, or doesn't continue to be an idol for us. So when I think about this tension, I think about productivity and then rest. And rest is something for many of us is really hard to embrace. I saw this tweet this week from a psychiatrist who was talking about how a lot of people are feeling all over the place feelings right now, like going back and forth and back and forth. And that's really a sign of stress, and the stress that we're going through, it's not a sign of failure on your part. So if you feel all over the place, it's not that you failed, it's that you're really stressed. And if you're feeling inconsistent, this psychiatrist said it's because our brain is trying to remain adaptive. So our brain is trying to figure out, where do I go next and how do I stay agile? And then I thought this was interesting. The psychiatrist said that our brain right now in the midst of crisis burns energy 10 times faster than normal. And so it makes us tired. And so if you're feeling tired, that's not failure from you right now. That's just real. That's really real life. And then they also said that if our creativity feels blocked, it's because our brain feels like it's focused more on the immediate problem solving, not on abstract thinking. And so there's a challenge here to rest more. Like, how do we embrace rest? So we've got this tension in our personal lives. We've got productivity, which is important. We feel like it's good to do, but we can't have an idle of productivity. Rest is critical, and we know that that's important. And then there's this piece of quality time. And I don't know about you guys, but one of the blessings of this, I mean, if you can say there's blessing in such a difficult experience, is that we have been given more time with those in our household, time to catch up with family and friends on Zoom, so we can have conversations with family and friends that are far away, and maybe we have more time to do that, some of us. And we should celebrate that. Like, that's great. It's good to celebrate, to recognize the blessing of our family. In fact, if we don't have the idol of productivity, I think sometimes it helps us to celebrate our relationships because our eyes are more open to them than they might be before. But also on the flip side of that, I think it's normal sometimes to feel sick of our family at this time, to feel sick of our family in our household, or to feel sick of even all the Zoom calls with everybody, right? Like that's really okay. And I just think for us parents, the challenge is like, you know, with our kids at home with us all the time now, like we don't need to cater to our every child's whim. You know, we don't have to be super parent that says we have to just constantly have family time. You know, boundaries are important too. Also, it's okay to not try to catch up with friends and family every day on Zoom. Like if that's a thing that zaps you, Zoom calls are exhausting. I read something this week that was talking about like these online things that we do. We have been conditioned in our culture to when we stare at a screen to either pursue entertainment or to be working. So usually that's what we tend to do on screens. So when we connect with one another over Zoom, we feel, our brain feels like it should be working or it should be getting entertained at that time. And so it's hard to connect and our brain just ends up working harder. So these things are wonderful. It's beautiful to connect with family more, to connect with friends, all those kind of things, but it doesn't have to fill up all of our time and we don't have to feel like we have to do that. And so I was thinking about this tension of productivity and rest and quality time, how we're trying to balance, and we're trying to balance those all the time in our lives. But especially during this, it's kind of all come to the surface. And so the thing that Christians can remember, just like if you remember when we talked about the global tension, we talked about empathy is so important. I think when it comes to the personal tension, it's important that we remember grace, that God is at work even when we're not, that the world doesn't revolve around us. It doesn't revolve around us being super productive. It doesn't revolve around us being the perfect, whatever, parent, family member, friend, anything like that. And then also we need rest and we need rhythms in our life. So we need kind of both of those things together. So anyway, we talked about kind of a global tension, talked about a personal tension. And then the third one I think is this existential tension. And we're all struggling with this grieving certain things in our lives and yet also trying to be hopeful. And sometimes that's really hard to navigate. And sometimes we don't fully know how to grieve because this thing is different. This pandemic that we're experiencing is different than some grief that we experience. Some grief, there's a loss and you feel that loss immediately and there's an ending, right? A loss of a job or a loss of even a family member or a loved one. This pandemic is this loss of kind of normalcy, but it's not over yet. So we don't know fully how to grieve that. And so it's confusing and it's hard. And I think that Emmaus story in Luke 24 that we read, many of us read last Sunday, where you have the disciples leaving Jerusalem is so good for this. Because the disciples are grieving. We've lost Jesus. It's over. This person we put our hope in has died. Rome's got them. And yet there's these rumblings about his body's been stolen. And there's maybe this sign of maybe resurrection. And it's just very like confusing. We can't even grieve because we don't even know that it's over. And I think the challenge for us, first of all, is just to have permission to go, it's okay to grieve what we've lost. It's okay to say that like life is different right now and this is hard and that's okay. And then also it's okay to say we have hope, but the hope isn't just optimism and it doesn't deny what we've lost. It's not just, well, everything's going to get back to normal soon. And so we don't need to grieve this. In fact, I think there's like a false hope, a lot of false hope out there that we're so ready to get back to normal, but normal may not be a very good goal. Normal may be a misplaced hope because normal wasn't working well for us. If normal means go back to being obsessed with productivity, or we pursue these other counterfeits to God's best for us, or we're disconnected, that's not a good hope. So I think there's the important thing for Christians here. You know, we've talked about empathy, we've talked about grace, and then I think just Christian hope, which Christian hope is a bit different because our hope is beyond our current circumstances and even is beyond death. And so one of the things I think so profound about Jesus in these resurrection stories is he listens to the disciples' pain and he grieves with them. So he walks with them and he just listens. Tell me your pain. Even with Thomas, you know, when Thomas doubts, it's Jesus meets him where he is. You know, let me show you this. And then he's revealed to them in a way that they didn't expect. So it wasn't their normal. Resurrection wasn't their expectation, and it wasn't normal. It was something completely different. And so my thought in this kind of existential tension is to kind of recalibrate ourselves and go, God, in what ways might you reveal yourself to me in this time or after this time that isn't just getting back to normal, but is quite surprising and might be quite different. And so that challenge of grief and hope is necessary. So anyway, I've just been thinking, I mean, when Misty asked me about this, she just said, talk about whatever you're reflecting on and thinking about right now. And I'm just thinking about these in-between times. Easter, we celebrate that Christ is risen from the dead. That means the world's a different place. And yet we still wrestle right now. And that's okay. God meets us in that wrestling. And remembering that empathy for others and that grace for ourselves. And then also the fact that there's hope in this. Those are a few of kind of the thoughts that I've had through this.
I love that. Helpful thoughts. You know, one of the things, Father Preston, that I think moments just walking through this reveal is just more of just who we are, right? I mean, I think the ancient philosopher Socrates basically says the unexamined life isn't worth living, that there's some way in which we are who we are until we understand ourselves and begin to address. If you have in pipe factories, when they type in or make an impression, 250 pounds PSI, they test those pipes rather randomly to see whether or not those pipes are actually able to handle that kind of pressure. So they put them on, and then if there's some way in which the pipe, begins to split or open up, it means that the identification on the outside isn't true to what it actually is, right? That there's some flaw. And I think that these moments like this, where our expectations aren't met, or there are ways in which we are under pressure, it does really reveal who we are. And it's really a gift in that we can start addressing, well, who am I? What's actually going on? What am I actually responding to? Where do I actually run? And I think that the real gift of these kinds of seasons is to begin to face ourselves and to begin to see what it is, how we track, where we hide, what we do. And because it's, if when we're in normal, what we call normal life, sometimes we can live under the illusion that all is well. We can live under the illusion that our souls are 500 PSI when really they're 102 PSI. And so under these kinds of circumstances, we can begin to see what's really going on inside us. The longer this thing goes on, the more we get a chance to look at ourselves. So one of the joys of it is just the ability to come to know oneself and to process these things and to try to understand what are the that kind of notion of self-discovery is both frightening and hopeful in this context for you as a pastor, for people and for yourself.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I mean, I think part of it too is recognizing that PSI is, people's fear points have such a really important part of that. I think it's revealed during this time. So like what is it that we're afraid of, and how have those fears driven us? And so, for some, it's fear of security, which is a totally natural, normal fear, right? And so, but some of us spend a lot of our wheels oftentimes trying to just make sure that our family is just so secure that nothing could ever happen to us. And security almost becomes that thing that we've chased our whole life. I mean, that becomes kind of our main focus. I think for some it's influence, it's how do I get enough people to like me or to get farther along, in the journey or higher up the ladder or whatever it is. And then, some of us, it's just control, and this has been really hard for control, because it's like, if we feel like we have some control over our lives, and all of us do, I think about like those little, we all have these driving machines outside that kind of go places, right? and they take us places. But right now, those driving machines, and that gives us a sense of control. Like we feel like we can go from point A to point B whenever we want, right? But these driving machines are just sitting out there most of the time now, and we don't have that control.
Even though the gas is so cheap.
It would ordinarily be a great time, wouldn't it? So I just think you're right on. It reveals something in us. Like, what is it that I've chased? What is it that I've gone after? And, either I think influence is up to me. I think security is completely up to me. I think control is completely up to me. And then trusting, actually, as Christians, we kind of live by a better story than that. And there's somebody else that is in charge of that, and we get to participate in his work. But ultimately, we're in his hands.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the Luke 24 text. For those, if you don't remember that text, it's that story. We read it as the gospel message. We asked Father Brent if he would kind of share just some other general principles, and he didn't really dive deeply into that in our Sunday service. But it's the text where Jesus is walking along with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. And in the text, you have this deep sense of one thing. Emmaus is not a real place I think I've ever found, right? So there's this kind of sense in which the disciples are journeying to a place that's unknown, right? And in some ways, that's exactly what we're experiencing. And there's this deep sense of angst as they're walking along, not understanding what's going on and what is the deal with Jesus and how is he appearing to us? How is he speaking in this? Is he dead? Is he alive? And he comes along. And what's so fantastic about the text is they're prevented from recognizing him, which begs the question, how often in our lives does God keep us from recognizing him? That there's something beautiful about a commitment to God when we don't see him or understand him or have any sense of perception of him, even though we're believing he's with us, right, in some way. And in the process of the story, they're sharing their angst, they're sharing their issues about what's going on very openly. And he finally opens up and begins to talk to them in ways that burn their hearts, but he doesn't really clearly be seen until he's in the moment of sacrament and the Eucharist. Their eyes are open and they recognize him. Just that notion that what if God is with us for a long time before we ever recognize him? And what if in these kinds of moments in our lives, as we're plodding along and we're wrestling with ourselves and we're not doing a very good job and we're bumbling around, what if that's all okay? What if the joy of discovering ourselves and our lack and our poverty of spirit, what if that's just all part of the process while he's still with us through this whole thing? And the confidence really is not that we get it right, but that we finally discover the one who's always been with us, and that there's some point at which we recognize him within the context of our lives. So such a beautiful, beautiful story.
I love when those two disciples are walking away from Jerusalem, and it says they're talking with each other as they walk along the road. And as a verbal processor, I'm just somebody that, like, if you're experiencing pain or, experiencing grief, it's just like, I just want to talk it out with somebody. And then after talking it out and they're processing it, that's when Jesus meets them and begins to share really how they should understand their own story. And I just love that.
So beautiful. All right. Anybody want to say anything? We're going to pray, and it's already 24 after. This goes pretty quickly. I do want to pray this prayer in the midst of this COVID situation about God helping us, and pray big prayers that will change the world and change the circumstance. We reach out with our hearts and pray these big prayers. We'll pray that in a second. But anyone who wanted to say anything before we go to that? Remember, silence is our friend. That's what Kate told us last week. I love that. He occupies space. All right, I'm going to ask you, Father Paul, to lead us in this prayer. And then I have a couple of things I want to say, and then we'll get off. Would you lead us, Father Paul?
Okay. Let's pray. This hour we turn to you, O Lord. in full knowledge of our frailty, our vulnerability, and our great need as your mortal creatures. We cry to you as one human family, unsure of the path ahead, unequal to the unseen forces around us, frightened by the sickness and death that seem all too real to us now. Stir up your strength and visit us, O Lord.
Yes.
Be our shield and rock and hiding place. Guide our leaders, our scientists, our nurses and doctors. Give them wisdom and fill their hearts with courage and determination. Make even this hour, O Lord, a season of blessing for us, that in fear we find you mighty to save, and in illness or death we find the cross to be none other than the way of life. All this we ask in the name of the one who bore all our infirmities, even Jesus Christ, our risen and victorious Lord. Amen.
Amen. What a beautiful prayer. Okay, family. Next week, starting next week, we're going to be moving the 8s. We'll be meeting every morning for the BCP, but we'll be moving the 8s to Tuesdays and Thursdays and dropping them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The reason for this is because we're going to move on Monday, Wednesday, Friday to prayer in the evening for the comp line, which we're going to stay at a little later. Just stay tuned for that. So we'll still have an opportunity to connect, but it will be for prayer instead of just conversation. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we'll continue to have a guest or one of us will share in this evening of the 8s. But we kind of feel as the longer we get into this, the more we feel we need to pray. I hope that some of you have that kind of a passion about that. Our church and the diocese we're part of, we want to be a praying people. We want to unite our hearts and cry out to God, hear scripture, and then pray from that place. We just feel like that's part of a central aspect of our calling. So anyway, watch for that. We'll meet the rest of this week, Monday through Friday, in 8 a.m., 8 p.m. Join us if you can in the morning for the Book of Common Prayer. I always think it's wonderful, even though it's dreadfully boring at spots, it's still wonderful for our souls. So join us in the morning at 8 a.m. and then 8 p.m. through the rest of this week. And then next week will be 8 a.m. every morning, and then Tuesday and Thursday. And then we'll give you the other information for the comp line. Pastor or Father Preston, thank you so much. You are a joy to my heart. It's always, Preston has been part of our lives for so many years, and just have nothing but respect and love for you, my friend, and they're so proud of you. So thank you for being part of this, and thank you for sharing tonight.
Thanks
Amen.
for inviting me. Thank you. It's good to see all your faces.
All right, everybody, Godspeed. You have a good night's sleep, and we'll see you in the morning.